Right now, as your car sits outside, whether it's parked in a quiet driveway, left under the harsh midday sun, or resting overnight under streetlights, something is slowly eating away at it. Not the engine, not the electronics, not even the tires, but the very surface you see every single day without thinking twice. The paint. What appears to be a normal, slightly dull finish is often the beginning of a much deeper problem. A silent breakdown happening at a level too small for the eye to detect. Ultraviolet radiation from sunlight is constantly striking the surface, penetrating the clear coat that was designed to protect it. Oxygen in the air reacts with exposed compounds, gradually altering their structure. Heat builds during the day, causing the surface to expand, then cools at night, forcing it to contract. This cycle repeats over and over again, and with each repetition, the protective layer weakens just a little more, thinning, cracking, fading. Day after day, without sound, without warning, your paint is slowly deteriorating. At first, almost no one notices. The changes are subtle. A slight reduction in shine, a small patch that doesn't reflect light quite the same way as the rest of the panel. Maybe the hood looks just a bit flatter than it used to, or the roof seems to absorb light instead of bouncing it back. These early signs are easy to ignore because they don't feel urgent, but over time, the effect compounds. The color begins to fade unevenly. The once smooth surface develops a dry, chalky texture. The deep gloss that made the car look new disappears completely, and eventually, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The paint looks tired, aged, lifeless, as if the car has lost years of its appearance in a short period of time. By the time most people reach this point, they've already accepted a conclusion without questioning it. They assume the damage is permanent, that the paint is gone, that nothing can bring it back. And with that assumption comes a single expensive solution: repainting. It feels like the only logical next step, the only way to restore what has been lost. And that's where the real problem begins, because repainting isn't a simple fix, it's a costly commitment. Repairing just one panel can run into the hundreds of dollars. A full repaint can easily cost anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, sometimes even more depending on the vehicle and the quality of the work. For many car owners, that price is hard to justify, so instead of fixing the issue, they live with it. They continue driving a car that looks older, more worn, and more neglected than it actually is. Not because it has to be that way, but because they believe there is no alternative. But here's the question that changes everything. What if that belief is wrong? What if the fading, the dullness, the lifeless finish you're seeing isn't the end of your paint, but just one stage in a process that can still be reversed? Because once you start questioning that assumption, the entire system built around it begins to look very different. The automotive paint and body repair industry isn't small. It's a multi-billion-dollar machine operating at scale across every country where cars exist. Every year, billions are spent restoring surfaces that have faded, oxidized, or lost their original shine. And the solution presented to almost every car owner is always the same: repainting, full correction, professional restoration. Expensive, time-consuming, and often positioned as the only real option. But what's rarely discussed is whether that solution is always necessary, or simply the most profitable path. Think about how the process usually works. You notice your paint looks dull. Maybe the hood has lost its reflection, or the roof looks worn out from years under the sun. You take it to a shop, or you search online, and the answer comes back quickly and consistently: repaint it. That's the standard advice. No alternatives, no deeper explanation. just a direct path to a high-cost fix. But here's where things start to break down. Because if repainting were truly the only solution, then every single case of faded paint would have to be irreversible. There would be no middle ground, no partial recovery, no way to improve the condition without completely replacing the surface. And yet, if you look closely, that assumption doesn't always hold up. Many cars with dead paint still have intact color underneath. The damage appears to be on the surface, but the entire system is treated as if it has failed completely. So why is that? Because in any industry, the solutions that get promoted are often the ones that sustain the system itself. A repaint generates significant revenue. It requires specialized equipment, trained labor, controlled environments, and multiple layers of material. It justifies high pricing. It creates dependency. And most importantly, it reinforces the idea that the average person cannot solve the problem on their own. Now imagine the opposite scenario. Imagine if car owners widely understood that in many cases, faded paint is not total failure, but a reversible condition. Imagine if people knew that the issue often exists within the outermost layer, and that under the right conditions, it could be improved without repainting. How many people would still agree to spend thousands of dollars? How many would choose a complex solution when a simpler one might exist? The answer is uncomfortable, but obvious. Because when knowledge reduces dependency, it also reduces profit. And in a system built around high-cost solutions, low-cost alternatives don't get highlighted. They don't get explained. They don't get recommended. Not because they don't exist, but because they change the way people make decisions. So the real question isn't just what's happening to your paint. It's why you were led to believe that repainting was the only way to fix it. To really understand why that assumption falls apart, you have to look beneath what you can see and focus on what's actually happening at the microscopic level of your car's paint. Modern automotive paint isn't just a single layer of color. It's a multi-layered system, engineered for both appearance and protection. At the very top sits the clear coat, a transparent shield designed to protect the colored base layer underneath. When your car is brand new, this clear coat is smooth, uniform, and chemically stable. It reflects light in a consistent way, which is why the surface looks deep, glossy, and almost mirror-like. But over time, that structure begins to break down in ways that are completely invisible at first. The primary force driving this breakdown is ultraviolet radiation. Every time your car sits under the sun, UV rays penetrate the clear coat and start weakening the molecular bonds that hold it together. Oxygen in the air reacts with exposed compounds in a process known as oxidation, gradually altering the surface chemistry. Add heat into the equation, expansion during the day, contraction at night, and you create continuous stress across the surface. These forces don't cause immediate damage. Instead, they create microscopic fractures, tiny imperfections that slowly spread across the clear coat. At first, these micro defects are too small to notice, but as they accumulate, they begin to change how light interacts with the surface. Instead of reflecting cleanly, light scatters in different directions. That's when the gloss starts to fade. That's when the paint begins to look dull, chalky, and lifeless. Not because the color underneath is gone, but because the surface above it is no longer functioning the way it should. And this is the detail most people never learn. In many cases, the underlying paint layer, the actual pigment, is still intact. The color hasn't disappeared. It's simply being masked by a damaged, oxidized clear coat that no longer reflects light properly. What looks like dead paint is often just a compromised outer layer, And that distinction changes everything. Because if the problem exists at the surface level, within those microscopic cracks and oxidized regions, then restoring the appearance isn't about replacing the paint. It's about changing how that surface behaves. Certain compounds can interact with these damaged areas, penetrating into the microfractures, bonding with the oxidized material, and effectively smoothing out the surface at a level you can't see, but can immediately recognize visually. When that happens, light begins to reflect more uniformly again. The gloss returns, the depth comes back. What looked faded starts to look rich again. Not because new paint was applied, but because the existing structure was stabilized and reconditioned. This isn't experimental theory. Variations of this process have been used for decades in industrial coatings, material preservation, and surface restoration. The chemistry is well understood, the effects are predictable, and when applied correctly, the transformation can be dramatic. So at this point, the question is no longer whether restoration is possible. It's why this level of understanding isn't common knowledge in the first place. This is the moment where everything starts to shift. Once you understand what's really happening to your car's paint, the solution no longer feels complicated. It feels surprisingly simple. The same type of surface interaction used in industrial restoration, designed to stabilize damaged layers and improve how they reflect light, is not limited to professionals. It exists in affordable products that cost just a few dollars, not hundreds, not thousands. Just a small cost for something that can significantly change how your paint looks. These solutions don't fight the damage, they work with it. Instead of stripping away layers or replacing the surface, they interact directly with the weakened clear coat. They move into microscopic cracks, pores, and oxidized areas that cause light to scatter. As they settle, they help smooth out the surface at a level you can't see, but the result becomes visible almost instantly. Light reflects more evenly, color appears deeper, and the dull, chalky finish begins to regain its richness. What once looked lifeless can start to look restored again. The process itself is also far simpler than most people expect. It doesn't require specialized tools, expensive equipment, or professional training. In many cases, it's just a matter of cleaning the surface, applying a small amount of product, and letting it spread evenly. Within minutes, the improvement becomes noticeable, but it's important to stay realistic. This isn't a universal fix for every situation. If the clear coat is completely gone, or the damage has reached deeper layers, no liquid can fully bring it back. There are limits, and understanding them is key. However, for many common cases, faded panels, oxidized surfaces, sun-damaged areas, this method can deliver results that are far better than expected, often for less than the cost of a single meal. So if a simple and low-cost approach can restore your paint in so many situations, why is repainting still seen as the default?